Hey guys, welcome to EF Live. Today with me, as you can see right over there, I have Dom Wells with me. Fantastic guest, great topic, and I'm excited for the show. Guys, everyone welcome in YouTube and Facebook if you're there. Post where you're coming at us from and, just wish us, a hello, and we want to call you out. So, Dom, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, thanks. Happy to be here. Looking forward to
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah, it's going to be it's an interesting topic for sure because a lot of times people just think, that, you know, they can either do it all alone or they want to outsource everything from the beginning. And as we're going to talk about today, that either both of those may not be the best strategy.
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people have to figure out when the time
Mm-hmm.
comes. Certainly, in my case, I would have been happy just doing everything by myself, but I realized quite quickly if I wanted to grow the business and scale, I was going to have to outsource. Um, and I had no idea how to start it. So,
Romaine coming at us from Portugal. Hello, Romaine. Hope you're doing well. Portugal, I'm so bad with geography. I know it's South America. I'm just like, which coast is it on? It's the west coast of South America, isn't it? No. Heck, I don't know. Somewhere. Hello, Romaine. And Swigme's World. Hello. Hola from Medellin. Medellin, Colombia. I do know where that is. So, Dom, it's next to Spain. Oh, Portugal, Europe. Oh my gosh, I'm dumb. I'm a moron. Um, well, that was a good moment, Dom. So why don't while neither of us are claiming to be experts in geography, why don't you tell us about your background a little bit and why you're an expert in building and scaling businesses?
yeah, sure. So, I'm originally from England, and I assume you know where that is. But in 2008, I moved to Taiwan. I just graduated from university. I wanted to teach English, and I ended up staying a long time because I really liked Taiwan. And around 2012, I decided I didn't want to teach English anymore. So I started looking online, started learning about internet marketing, and built my first niche sites. Some of them did okay. Most of the first ones didn't do so well because that's just kind of how it goes. And then I don't know, about 2 years in, I thought I'm doing well here. I want to scale it. I want to grow. I'm kind of bored of writing content. I'm kind of bored of fiddling around with the back end of WordPress. There's just so much more I could do if I had more time. So that's when I first started realizing that maybe I didn't have to just suffer through all this boring, monotonous stuff myself. Um, it's kind of a tough decision to make at first because you're used to making all the money yourself, and you're thinking, if I outsource for say $500 or $1,000 a month, and I make an extra 10 grand, then yeah, it's totally worth it. But what happens if I spend all that money and I don't make any more money? Then I'm just wasting money. So I kind of went through these mental gymnastics for probably 6 months longer than I should have done. And then, yeah, so I guess it was around late 2014 that I first really hired my first person. Like I'd used content agencies before, but like my first actual like Upwork hire was late 2014. And now fast forward to today, and we have over 200 active Upwork contracts. I got a Christmas card from Upwork. So, very quickly it accelerates from I don't know what I'm doing to, oh, I've got a lot of people that I'm outsourcing to. So yeah, I guess that's what qualifies me to consider myself an expert in this situation.
I mean, 200 is a lot, and just the fact that received a card from Upwork is, something in and of itself. Tom Trial, yes, this is live now. Welcome to the show. Tom and everyone else watching, we will be doing Q&A at the end of the show. So definitely stick around, ask us any questions you have, and if it's super relevant, we may answer it. Sorry, when you ask it, but for the most part, questions will be saved for the end, and we want to hit as many as we can. So definitely get all your questions in, and yeah, we'll hopefully be able to help you out here. So, Dom, let's just kind of dive into this. And again, if you're just tuning in, our topic today is going to be scaling a team to run a portfolio. Now, the first question that you need to answer, obviously, is when to start building a team. Dom, when do you start?
Uh, it depends on each individual person. I think most people end up starting way too late, perhaps for the same reasons that I explained earlier. But the time when most people should really start considering it is when time becomes your biggest problem. So often when you first start, money is your biggest problem. A lot of people want to build a business online because they want to earn more money. So they've got loads of time. They don't mind writing content, doing keyword research, but they don't necessarily have a budget to outsource. So when that scale starts to tip the other direction and you're making a bit of money, but you just think there's not enough hours in the day, I can't get everything done that I need to get done, then maybe you should start looking at
Mm-hmm.
outsourcing. Also, just when you have a budget, because you know if you're making a bit of money, like even just $500 a month, um, generally speaking, hiring someone's going to accelerate it. So you might be in a position where you do still have time, but you have a budget to hire someone, so you might as well, because think how much you can get done in 20 hours a week or 20 hours a month. If you can have 40 hours or 60 hours because you're buying other people's time, you're just going to get results exponentially faster.
So you feel that as soon as you can afford it in terms of time and money, you should. I mean, as soon as you can't afford the time anymore, like you've run out of time yourself, and as soon as you can afford the money is when you should hire.
Yeah, like nine times out
Mm-hmm.
of 10. I would add as well, we've got the third bullet point on this slide, that when you're not adding value to a task. So by that I mean generally as the kind of the steerer of the ship, the entrepreneur, there are many things that you do better than someone someone who you hire. But if we're just talking about things like uploading articles to WordPress and formatting, then you probably
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be doing that yourself. Unless you really have like no money and you can't even afford to pay someone a few dollars an hour to do it for you, then that's not something that you yourself need to do. So it's always better to have someone else do it for you.
You want to ensure that you are doing the tasks that you need to do, though, right? Like, how do you identify those tasks?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and it's one I'm still figuring out myself. Because those tasks
Mm-hmm.
change, right? Like at the beginning, you need to be doing keyword research, whereas now I don't do any keyword research for any of my websites because I know that there are people on my team who can do it just as well, if not better than me. But when you're first starting out, that might not be the case. You might not be good enough to teach someone
Mm-hmm.
else how to do it, or they may have been taught, a completely different style. So generally, I advise, and we'll talk about this a bit later, I advise you to start with the things where it's kind of obvious that you're not directly adding value, like something that anyone could do, like as I mentioned, formatting stuff in WordPress, or maybe writing articles. Depending, you might be a really good writer, and you may really enjoy it. I have a friend who outsources most of his content, but he still writes the money pages himself. So it's something like that. Like maybe you think this page is really, really important, so I want to write that, but the rest isn't as important. Like I'm happy just having a regular writer do it. So it's really a case of just kind of figuring out where your skill set is and what things it's easy for
Mm-hmm.
someone else to do and what kind of like specifically need you to do.
And that kind of brings us to the next topic here, and that is, in what order do you hire? And that, I mean, the first thing is, as we said, outsource the stuff that you are, that you don't add value to, or the lower level tasks first. But what about these other bullet points here?
Yeah, so I would like to add that I don't think there's right or wrong, like which to outsource first. Some people will outsource writing as soon as possible. Other people outsource keyword research. So it's very subjective. But as a general rule, I would say outsource what you hate first because it makes sense. If you don't enjoy doing it, get someone else to do it. I would also say outsource what you can teach or monitor the best. I think a lot of people make the mistake of outsourcing stuff that they don't know how to do themselves. And to some extent, sometimes that makes sense. Like, there are just some things that you don't necessarily have the ability or the time to learn yourself. But if there is stuff that you're already good at that you don't like doing, and you feel confident that I could assign this to a VA or a writer, and I would be capable of checking their work, that's a great place to start
Mm-hmm.
out. And of course, like the lower level tasks, which we've kind of touched on already.
So you, okay, how do I want to word this? You mentioned that you should outsource what you can teach and monitor the best. So when you say that, I take that to mean, let's say you aren't super well versed in social media marketing yourself, so you want to hire an expert. Where does that fall into this category? Because if let's talk about me hypothetically. If I'm not versed in social media marketing and I outsource that, then I can't really monitor and manage that.
Yeah, that I kind of touched on that. I think in some cases that's fine and it makes sense to just outsource it to an expert, like link building. A lot of people hire us to build
Mm-hmm.
links for them because they don't have the time to do it, they don't know how to do it, they just want us to do it. um, and the same with content writing. But I find it's easier to know how to gauge someone's work if you've got some experience outsourcing already. And the best way to get that experience is to kind of start in an area of competence. So, generally speaking, right now, if I don't know, like if I didn't know how to do social media marketing or Google Ads or something, and I used an agency to do it, or I hired an expert, I feel confident in my ability to assess them because I've been assessing people for 2 years. But if it was the very first thing that I outsourced, I might wonder, if I'm not getting the results, is it because of them or is it because of this? Or so I just think you should kind of level up your
Mm-hmm.
outsourcing skill set before you go with stuff that is harder for you to monitor.
And to put this into perspective again, Dom, as he said before, has 200 plus active contracts on Upwork with outsourcing these tasks, and he's built businesses, and it's he knows what he's talking about. But it's just fascinating to me because I would think that you would have more success if you just hired an expert to do all the things you don't know how to do yourself.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I said there's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, that can
Mm-hmm.
work, but I've also found, so I'll give you an example. Like when I first started hiring writers, I I found I had to undo a lot of their previous employers' teachings. Like I had writers who I would tell them the article title that I wanted them to write. I'd give them a couple of keywords that I wanted them to use in the article, and they'd write an article and it wasn't bad. I mean, some of it was terrible. You get a load of people applying to be writers who shouldn't be writing, but they would do things like bolding the keywords or underlining the keywords. They'd stuff the keywords into sentences so it sounded like it was written by a machine. I mean, maybe sometimes they had done that. And I would be like, "That okay? You don't need to do that. That's like 2006 style SEO. I don't know. Obviously a previous employer had said I want you to bold the
Mm-hmm.
keywords, so that's fine, but don't do it for me." Um, and I found it a lot easier to spot people's mistakes and to clarify my instructions because I knew what made a good article. I had written, hundreds of successful articles and ranked them. And the same when I started doing keyword research. One of my very first keyword research guys, I would tell him to, come back with a niche because I wanted to build a website around that niche. And he would say, yeah, all of these keywords are great because the websites that are ranking for those keywords are not optimized at all. And the problem was they were e-commerce keywords. And without going too much into the weeds, if you are trying to rank an affiliate website for an e-commerce keyword, it doesn't really matter if all of the websites that are ranking are not
Mm-hmm.
optimized for it. They're e-commerce sites. You're an affiliate site. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to rank. So I was able to spot that and correct that. So I feel if you're outsourcing to an agency, which is reputable and has a track record and everyone, recommends them, gives them positive reviews, yeah, chances are you will have more success. But if you're hiring a VA or outsourcing to individuals, it just makes sense to know what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
before you're actually hiring them. Otherwise, you're just going to get results. You're going to get keywords that are not correct, and you're going to get articles that are not optimized, and you're not necessarily going to know that
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
And that, I mean, makes sense. So when you've decided that it is time to hire someone for a specific job, how do you find these people? I know you've mentioned Upwork, but where else do you find them?
Um, yeah, Upwork's a good one for us, but it doesn't have to be there. People per hour is good. It's not great if you want to scale a large team because there's a few issues with the platform that I have. But if you just want to pick up one or two freelancers, there's a lot of sort of hidden gems in people per hour, a lot of people that are high quality. And again, depending what you want, Facebook groups can be okay. There's a lot of internet marketing Facebook groups out there, and there are people who offer their services, and there are people who post like I'm looking for something and someone will reply. That is a little bit more hit and miss because there's a lot of people in there that are just hungry for work and they'll say they can do anything when they can't, and it's a lot harder to vet them. So generally I recommend places like
Mm-hmm.
Upwork simply because they've got reviews, they've got ratings. It's like using Airbnb, it's really simple.
And when you look on Upwork or something like that, do you generally look for, let's say you're writing or you're hiring for a writer, do you look for an English speaker? Do you look for an English speaker for social media marketing? What kinds of people, what kinds of traits are you looking for when you hire?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people on Upwork who use the phrase English speaker a bit liberally. Um, but yeah, like if we're hiring a writer, then of course native English speaker is a requirement. If we're hiring any other job, if it's a job where someone doesn't have to kind of put out public facing English, like keyword research, for example, um, I want them to speak English, but I'm not worried about the
Mm-hmm.
quality of it. What's much more important, whether they're fluent, they could be from America or they could be from India. What's more important is communication in general. So I always put good communication is essential. And I've hired people before, and after a couple of days, they haven't let me know anything. They haven't replied. They haven't even acknowledged the job. So they generally lose their job
Mm-hmm.
quite quickly. If someone's if someone's going to run into trouble and there's a delay or whatever, and there always are delays. If they just message you and say, "Hey, there's going to be a delay. Here's the work I've done so far. I'll get the rest to you as soon as possible." That's really, really good. But if they just come back to you 10 days later and they're like, "Sorry, sorry, I'm late. Here's the work," then they don't have a long-term career with me ahead of them. Um, we also look for attention to detail. So this is quite well known. A lot of people do this. When we post a job listing, we say in your application, you have to tell us your favorite color, or, we mix it up, but usually it's something like that. And if someone doesn't say what their favorite color is, then they're probably not going to get the job just because, we don't care what their favorite color is, but they didn't read the
Hmm.
listing properly, so they're not going to read any other instructions properly. So yeah, I mean, the most important thing for us is attitude and communication, um, and then it's a lot easier to teach someone if they have the right attitude.
So if you're applying for an online job and you see a question that seems completely irrelevant to you, would you say that chances are it's in there just to see if you're reading?
Yeah, possibly. Um, yeah, yeah, maybe if it's like a remote job,
What's your
quite
favorite
possibly.
color? Yeah,
I don't know.
that struck me as funny. Um,
Yeah.
so, something that I want to touch on briefly before we move on from this is you have, in addition to building your own businesses and, starting from scratch, you have purchased businesses from Empire Flippers. You purchased, as you and I were talking about before, you purchased one, last week, and you're in the process of possibly purchasing another. So, with
Hmm.
that said, when you dive into a new business that you take over, it's different when you're starting and you can scale as you go. When you jump into a fully running business, I mean, how do you go about outsourcing the work, or do you just kind of take it all on yourself? Or when you buy it, do you outsource all the different parts? What do you do?
Well, I have various full-time staff now who they generally do the day-to-day running of human-proof designs. But I also have started utilizing them for portfolio sites as well. So I wouldn't necessarily hire a team specifically for a site I bought. It would be more that I plugged them into my existing
Okay.
team. So I guess I want to give an answer that's helpful to someone who may be watching, who wants to buy a site and doesn't have a team. So yeah, I mean, I would totally hire a team, and I think if you're going to spend, upwards of 30 grand on a website, you can do everything yourself. But I think if you've got that much money to spend, then your biggest problem probably isn't money. So you don't need to do everything yourself. Your biggest problem is probably time or skill set. Like maybe you want to quit your job, or maybe you're like me, where you've scaled up to the point where you've got money to
Hmm.
invest in websites. So generally, you should have a team already, or should have the ability to build one.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So you just kind of add the duties of the new business, of the new site, to the duties of your existing team that you have for your other parts of your portfolio.
Yeah, and we may, maybe we buy a site that suddenly increases our workload by 10 hours and everyone's at capacity. So maybe in that case we'll be like, okay, we need another
Hmm.
VA for this, or we need something else. But, that VA would kind of be plugged into the existing team rather than, like
Hmm.
dedicated.
And totally not relevant to what we're talking about. It's just it's interesting to me. As you told me before, when you purchased the business and the one you're currently thinking about purchasing, you use Bitcoin. I just think that's super fascinating. Can you talk very briefly, because it's not relevant, but can you talk very briefly about that decision there, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, the one I bought last week, I actually paid
Oh,
cash.
well.
Um, but this one will probably be, yeah, we'll see. But because Bitcoin's bleeding right now, so it's trickier. But there's two reasons. One is that I just happen to have some of my funds in Bitcoin or in other cryptos, and I thought, okay, I could just sell some of that to fund this purchase, rather than. And then I thought, well, okay, it's going to take time. Um, I'm going to have to liquidate it. I'm going to have to cash out the crypto into my bank account. Then I'm going to have to send it to yours, and that takes time. And as we know, with Empire Flippers, you've got the wire race, which can be pretty stressful. So I just kind of reached out and was like, "Do you guys, can I just send it directly to you so that I don't have to wait 4 or 5 days to actually um, get the money into your bank account? It might be just easier to use crypto." So there's nothing, there's no real
Hmm.
reason other than it was practical
and
for me.
convenient, and that's really really interesting. So speaking of money, tying it back in here, when you do hire people, how much should you pay them?
Um, yeah, this one's hard. It ultimately depends on the task. It depends on whether you want, like an A player or a kind of more average player. But generally, people who are just starting out, I tell them if they want to hire like a project manager or someone to be like a kind of general website VA, like, just someone who can look after the daily tasks of their website. I think $10 an hour is a good starting point for that. You can find some pretty solid people there. Like, yeah, you could probably pay five, but the people you get for five, they're not going to do it forever. They may be just someone who's looking for some quick
Mm-hmm.
cash. And 5 months later, they're like, I can't do this forever. Or they're just not very good. Whereas $10, I find, is the area where you can start getting some really quality people. Um, and don't feel bad if you hire someone for 20. Don't feel like you're paying too much. If you're hiring someone for 20, they're probably really good. So it all depends on you. That's just like where I tell people
Mm-hmm.
to start feeling out. um, and the same with content. Like, content's super subjective. It's really hard to know how much you should pay. Generally, I tell people to look around the $10 to $20 per 1,000 word
Mm-hmm.
mark. And again, you know, you can find some people who will do it for five and they can write really well. Maybe they don't realize that they should be charging more. And I've paid people $100 for 1,000 words. So it's just, this is just a good starting point for people to get their feet wet. And once you start to hire a few people at this price point, you get comparison as well, and you can find what works for you. Maybe you hire someone for $10 an hour and someone for 15, but the 15 person gets the job done twice as fast. So ultimately, you're paying
Mm-hmm.
less. Or maybe the speed is the same, but the quality's better. So there's just so many different factors.
So do you typically? I know you try to go around the $10 mark. When you look for that, you mentioned the time involved. Obviously, if it takes them less time than whatever they make, it's gonna be you're gonna be paying less. But do you try to outsource one task per person, give them one job, or do you like to have kind of like a manager for a business and give them the task of kind of overseeing everything?
Or both, actually. I like to have a manager and then people below, and the people below generally would be one
Mm-hmm.
job. So, um, we all want to find this magical VA who's as good as we are at everything, and they can do keyword research, they can do on-page SEO, they can do off-page SEO. But these people, if they can do all of those things, then they're probably also trying to hire somebody. They're not trying to be
Mm-hmm.
hired. The exception is if you hire an apprentice, in which case, you'd probably be paying them a salary, or you'd be giving them a lot of full-time hours, and they will be trying to do everything. But yeah, generally the way I like to do it is, I would have like a writer or multiple writers, depending on how prolific the writers are. Some of them they can only write one article a week. And then I normally have one person whose job it is to upload the content and to format it and to do the on page, because I find you get much better content if you don't try to get your writers to write SEO optimized content. Give them the basics, like this is the title, try to use these keywords in the article. But writers are good at writing. They're not necessarily good at thinking, where should I put the keywords? Where should I, and all that normally happens is they either write unnaturally because they're thinking about other stuff, or they just stuff
Mm-hmm.
keywords. So, um, and at the end of the day, it costs you the same. So if there's 40 hours worth of work to be done, 20 hours is on writing and 20 hours is on formatting. It doesn't really matter whether you pay one person 40 hours or two people 20 hours. It's the same to you, but you'll generally get higher quality. And then when the need arises, I'll hire a manager above them, and then maybe now we have managers below our managers. So we have managers just for our writers, we have managers just for our editors, we have managers just for our keyword research team, and then we have managers above them, but we're a much larger operation than most people need to be. So most people will be fine with one manager.
When you talk about hiring for one task, is social media marketing one task, or is Facebook marketing one task and Instagram is one task?
Depends what you're doing. So I would say Facebook ads is one task, or maybe paid ads is one task. Um, but I wouldn't have like a Pinterest person and a Facebook person and a YouTube person. I would probably have one person doing
Mm-hmm.
all of that, just because. I mean, there are two reasons, I guess. One is normally, if someone can do Facebook, they can do Instagram, and the other is you wanna keep them loyal to you. You want to keep them only working for you. So it's better to be able to give one person more hours so that they're not looking for another job at the same time.
You mentioned how sometimes you may want to hire an apprentice and pay them more as you're training them rather than VAs. Can you give an example of a scenario in which case you would do that?
Yeah, so with my portfolio, I never actually used to really be that keen on the apprentice model. I know Empire Flippers, for example, you guys have had a lot of success with apprentices. Um, but I was always like, I'd rather hire someone with existing business skills and teach them my niche than hire someone who maybe is a follower and teach them business skills, because that's a lot harder. Um, but I've discovered apprentices can actually be pretty good
Mm-hmm.
as well. So for my portfolio, so like my business is kind of two real core businesses. There's Human Proof Designs, which is does all the services and does all the teaching, internet marketing. But then we also have our own websites as well, because it'd be kind of weird for us to teach internet marketing if we weren't doing it ourselves. And then for my portfolio, I have apprentices and VAs and one person who's like the head of the portfolio, and then me kind of pretending to work above them. And so it kind of goes the the VAs do a lot of the grunt work, so they'll do formatting of articles. Sometimes they'll do by VAs I also include like
Mm-hmm.
writers and
Okay.
stuff. So they'll be writing, um, and then above them we'll have apprentices, and they normally do a bit of everything, but they don't necessarily do a lot of the work. So an apprentice might log into Ahrefs and reverse engineer the keywords of a competitor, kind of higher level stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. They'll watch training videos that we've created. And then above them is the guy who's in charge of my portfolio, and he basically does like the overall
Mm-hmm.
strategy. And he also does my Facebook ads. He does a bunch of other stuff, but I was just like, maybe you'd like to run this arm of the business. But it's kind of a waste of money for me to have him doing the grunt work. So we've got apprentices in the middle, and they're people who they want to learn a little bit of everything. Maybe after a year they're going to leave because it's like happy leaving. They're like, yeah, you've taught me everything I wanted to know, but I want to strike out on my own now. Or maybe they stay because they like the work. So I do see that there's a benefit of having an apprentice, but I don't think you need to have one. I think you could have a project manager who just wants some stable income as
Mm-hmm.
well.
And Jill and Mickey and anyone else who just came in, welcome to the show, guys. We'll be doing Q&A. Jill will answer your question in just a little bit. Any questions you guys have any questions you guys have, definitely get them in YouTube chat and Facebook, and we'll get to them later. Dom, moving along here, we've kind of skirted around this topic a little bit, quite a bit, but can you just dive into your main tips and tricks for hiring?
Yeah, and I could probably do an entire episode on this, so I feel like I'm cheating everyone by just doing 3 bullet points. But basically, when I say use filters in your job posting, that's a little bit like what we talked about earlier, where I was saying you know, like on Upwork, you can normally include some questions that the person needs to answer, and you can do this anywhere. It's just easier on Upwork. Um, and it could be like, okay, question one, why are you good for this job? Question two, send me some previous work if you have some. Question three, what's your favorite color? And it could be anything. Like, what hobby do you have? What did you do last weekend? And this is just there to weed out the people who don't pay attention. And if you get 200 people apply for a job, it's a lot easier if only 48 of them have answered that question, because you're like, okay, I just need to pay attention to these. I think it was Chris Ducker who popularized that technique, but like a lot of people I know do it. It's pretty standard. Um, I like to test different times to post. So if I want to hire people in North America, maybe sometimes I'll post at say 9 a.m. Eastern. Sometimes I'll post at 9 p.m. Eastern. Because maybe people check while they're at work because they're depressed. They're like, I don't want to be at work. What jobs can I do? Or maybe they post when they get home from work. But it doesn't make sense to post at 2 o'clock in the morning, because then maybe by the time most of your ideal hires are awake, your posts kind of slip down onto page 2 of the Upwork like new postings section. Um, and I think the biggest tip I have is the final one, which is hire 2 to 3 people for one job. So if you just need one writer, hire 2 or 3. If you just need one VA to do keyword research, hire 2 or 3. Whatever you need, hire multiple. And that's for several reasons. One is because inevitably someone won't reply to you. Like, you'll hire them, you'll give them the work, they'll say great, and then you'll never hear from them again. Just some sort of weird phenomenon. I think I think you get a lot of people who their friend says, "Hey, you should check out Upwork. You can make some extra money," and they're like, "Cool," and then actually they can't be bothered. Sometimes you have people, they just go MIA later. Like, maybe they work for you for a little while and then they just vanish. But the most important reason is for comparison, because as we were talking in previous sides about how much you should pay, and I was saying you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. Like, if I pay this much, what kind of quality do I get? And you might hire someone for $10 and the work they did was terrible, and you think, oh man, I've got to pay $50. But it might be just that person sucked. So, you may hire someone from a certain country and they do terrible work, and you think, well, I'm never hiring people from there again. So when you have multiple people, you just get way clearer comparisons. You can see this person's well worth the money, that person's communication's really good, their attitude's great, this person, they're kind of in the middle. And so what I like to do is I like to hire when, maybe if I've got 10 articles I need written, I'll give each one of them a different article. Because then even if I don't hire 2 of them, I haven't really wasted the money, like, because I got my article written, unless it was bad. So, you don't want to just hire 3 people for the same task and you end up paying triple what you need. So, you have to think about it like that a little bit.
And once you've hired them, the next step along the way is to manage them. So, you have to have some tips and tricks for managing.
Yeah. My biggest tip is hire someone to manage. There's, we may have 200 Upwork contracts, but I don't speak to any of the people. I have people below me. But let's say you've only got 1 person or 3 people. Having clear expectations is huge, and obviously that sounds it sounds obvious, but it's more expectations on. I'm always upfront with people. I say, if you can't do the work for whatever reason, just let me know, because I'd rather someone has good communication than they try to get it done as quickly as possible. But also clear expectations with what I want the article, for example, to look like. So I'll always use examples if I can. Like, here's what here's what a finished article looks like. If I want a logo created, I'll give some examples of what I like. um, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time when you hire someone and they don't produce what you want, it's because they didn't really know what you wanted, and it may even be because you didn't know what you wanted. Um, so that's very
Mm-hmm.
important. Um, Weekly reports are good. So this is maybe not for writers because writers, you give them an article, they write it, they give it to you. But if you have VAs who generally are going to be doing the same sort of task all day, like a social media manager, for example, um, maybe in the beginning they could even do daily reporting, but essentially just get them to write you an email being like, here's what I did today, or here's what I did this week. Here's my goals for next week. Here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I would like to do in future. Just these kind of things. Like, get them to make it so that they're kind of thinking what to write in the report rather than you just saying, I want to hear this, this, and this, just because then it gives them more ownership of the job.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, weekly reports are good, and you can, as people work for you for longer and get more, um, just more competent at their job. You can reduce that if you want, like monthly reports, or if they're doing daily, they can go to a weekly. Um, I think it's really important with remote workers. And then I like to share bigger goals as well. Like if people are writing, I like to be like, I don't want them to just think of it as an arbitrary article that they're writing. I want you to be like, I'm creating this website. This is what it's about. This is what I want to help the audience with. This is kind of where you fit
Mm-hmm.
into it. I think people just generally respond well to that. And the final one we talked about a bit. If possible, I think it's better if you do the tasks yourself first so that well, first of all, you can document the steps so that it's a lot easier for you to teach someone, but also you kind of have a rough understanding of what it takes, how long it takes, and just, maybe some of the other nuances
Mm-hmm.
involved.
And that's something that is, it's a very interesting take, and obviously you've had much success with that approach. Um, if you are competent in an area yourself, it's easier to grade other people's work in that area. So, Dom, this has been awesome. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We That does mean we are going to be coming into the Q&A portion. So we do have some questions coming in, guys. It looks awesome. Thank you for all of that, and I will get to them in just a minute. Before we do, while anyone else gets any questions in they have, something I want to touch on real quick is a featured listing over here at Empire Flippers. Now, Dom, as we said, you've purchased from Empire Flippers before. So let's say hypothetically you are purchasing this listing, and this listing, oh, that's the wrong slide. Listing 44272. Now it's an Amazon FBA business in the home and kitchen niche, and there's how much it's making: 26,000 in monthly revenue, 4,000 in monthly profit. And the reason I picked this listing, something that's interesting about this is you told me that you don't have much experience with Amazon FBA. So,
Yeah, like zero.
so zero experience with Amazon FBA. So if you were to take over this business, now hypothetically, it's yours. What's your first move, seeing as you lack some of the experience with Amazon?
Yeah, so I've just broken all of my rules. um, I mean, I know the theory of Amazon FBA. I know, a lot of people who do FBA, so it's not completely foreign to me. I've just never done it myself. Um, so actually, there's kind of a lot of information on the listing itself. Like, for example, it says the business takes minimal work to maintain. Uh, if the buyer wants to continue to build the brand, the seller feels this could be outsourced to one person since just one employee was the main point of contact. So, the first thing I would do would be to either assign one of my existing team to this business or to find someone who has FBA business
Mm-hmm.
experience. I may reach out to my network, like my email list, for example, or I would look on Upwork. Um, and also with this particular listing, I think one area where I could do well is it says that it has a branded domain and a website that showcases the product. So it seems like as well as selling on FBA, they also
Mm-hmm.
sell on their own website. So I think I would look at that and think, could we do some e-commerce SEO? Could we do some paid ads to that as well? I would also probably try to hire or speak to someone who knew a lot about FBA, because there's probably a bunch of stuff that I don't know. Um, and really, I think, it's hard for me to answer because I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a kind of pre-populated list of quick wins and stuff with
I mean, that
FBA
was a fantastic
like I do
answer,
with
though.
other
That,
sites.
that, that really was a fantastic answer. And what I did there when I turned around, I was about to sneeze and then it went away. Isn't that just the worst feeling? No, Dom, that was a fantastic, that was a great answer. And I hope, maybe someday you will buy an FBA business or start one, because it's a very lucrative area right now. That
Yeah.
is going to bring us into Q&A here, everyone, and definitely get us any questions. They could be about scaling a team, they could be about Amazon FBA, they could be about buying a business from Empire Flippers. Whatever you have a question about, Dom and I, we want to be able to help you. So let's start here. Jill Karen says, curious how you might find someone who is skilled at adding/formatting content in WordPress for affiliate-based sites. Not sure how to vet VAs for that specific need.
Um, yeah, we've hired about 10 or 15 people who do that, so they're definitely out there. Generally, with that, actually, we don't post for that particular job. Like, I mean, well, no, we don't ask people who have those skills to do it. We generally ask for people who have WordPress
Mm-hmm.
skills. And there's a lot of people in Upwork, and actually onlinejobs.ph works very well for this because it's a job that Filipinos, there's a lot of very good people in the Philippines who can do this, and they're a little bit cheaper than someone in the West. And so essentially, what we would do is we create the training first. We have clear SOPs on what we want to do. We say, this is how I want to format an article. This is like a checklist of things to look at. If necessary, we create screencasts, so video walkthroughs. Um, and when we're hiring people, we just want them to have kind of WordPress experience, competency, and as I mentioned, good attitude, good communication. Because at the end of the day, this is a good person will be able to just watch your videos, go through your training, and get the hang of
Mm-hmm.
it. So it's more a case of hiring the right person and being like, okay, you know your way around WordPress. This is what I want you to do, rather than being like, hey, I need someone who can format Amazon content, because you'll get a bunch of people applying who pretend they know what they're doing, but they don't. So, yeah, that's a good question.
Geo asks, can you please describe how you test communication skills? That's something that you touched on briefly earlier, as something that you don't like to see bad communication skills. So how do you test that?
It's it's usually really easy. Like you can tell quite quickly if someone has applied for your job and they're just using very poor English, like they can't be bothered to type words correctly. They're like, "Hi, I can do this, no problem." No grammar, no capital H. Then they've got bad communication skills. And usually you might want to ask them a few questions before you hire them. Like, you might say, I'm interested in giving you a shot at this job. Are you still interested? Because often when I post, I'll wait 24 hours just to let a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
applicants come in, and then I can go through in bulk rather than as they come in. So I might say, are you still interested in this? Because sometimes they apply for 10 jobs at once. And I've had people that look great. They're like the first person to apply. And then I say, hey, cool, I want to give you a shot. And then they never reply. So, you can kind of feel whether they're good at communicating or whether they're a little bit half-assed with communicating just by how responsive
Mm-hmm.
they are. Um, and then in terms of, let's say you do hire someone, you might say to them, hey, how's the job going? How's the work? And they might reply straight away and be like, yeah, it's really good. I should be finished on time, maybe even a little bit early. or they might just not reply for like 2 days and then be like, yeah, it's fine, you know, and you're like, okay, well, it's late. So, practice is how you learn how to vet communication skills, and kind of, you can kind of feel whether someone's being professional
Hmm.
or whether they've probably got 10 or 15 different things going on at once.
For the second part of the question, if a person lacks communication skills, how can he or she train themselves?
Huh, that's a good question.
Or I guess to kind of just branch off quickly, do you even give them a chance to train themselves, or do you, in your experience, have you just kind of gotten rid of that person and hired someone new?
Both, yeah. Sometimes, like, so. All right. First of all, let me clarify what I mean by communication skills. I generally mean communication in general. Like some people, because this is a remote job. You're not in an office. You don't even know if they've turned up for work. So by communication skills, I actually just mean communication. Like, do they
Hmm.
reply to messages in a good time? Um, are they clear? Are they polite? I don't really want to know how well they can articulate poetry. So I'm not too worried about that. So it's more just it's a combination of attitude and timely communication. So if I do hire someone and maybe their communication's not great, but their attitude's good and the quality of their work's good, then I might say to them, hey, this stuff's really good. I just would like you to communicate a bit faster, or whatever the problem is. But if their communication's poor, their work is late, and the quality is poor, then it's kind of like an uphill struggle, and you maybe just want to get rid of them and hire someone
Hmm.
else. Especially if, like, there's a large pool of other candidates who deserve a shot. It might be better to just give them a try instead.
And that kind of goes back to what you said earlier about hiring a couple different people to do one job when
Hmm.
you're trying to find people, and that if you hire a couple people and one person isn't responding or they're late, you still have a couple other people who are going to be getting results as well. That does lead me to a question I have about Upwork, since you have experience with it. How does Upwork handle, that kind of scenario where someone just doesn't respond, or you hire them and they're late?
They're actually pretty good with that. So generally speaking, if you didn't set a deadline, because you have the ability
Hmm.
within Upwork to say like this is due. So if someone didn't set a deadline, uh, it's harder for you to really, you just say here's the work, and they take a week to do it, and you wanted it in 3 days. Like if they did it and it was late, you kind of. I normally am just like, oh well, that's my fault for not giving a deadline. The work's done. I'll pay them, but I probably won't use them for another job. Um, if they never respond, you can just request a refund, and Upwork will usually uh, the freelancer can just approve your refund, and actually they're pretty good at it. It's like they don't, they're like, okay, yeah, I haven't done the work, fine, here's your money back. And but if they don't respond after, I think, 48 hours or 72 hours, I think it's automatically refunded. And Upwork have a pretty good support system to help you work things out. Like a lot of the time, maybe there's a dispute because you say, hey, this person hasn't done what I wanted, or they've done it to a really poor standard, and that person said, hey, I did exactly what you wanted, and then you changed the requirements. Often Upwork will just be like, okay, the freelancer gets paid and you get a
Hmm.
refund. At least with us, they do that, maybe because we're kind of a big deal. Um, I mean, to
Yeah.
them, I don't want to say that. I'm not Neil Patel, but yeah, they generally speaking, they've got a pretty good process for dealing with that, and I think they are
Hmm.
fair from what I've seen. I think actually they tend to favor employers more than employees a little
Hmm.
bit as well.
So we do have one more question here from Romain, our guy from over there in Portugal, which is in Europe. I could outsource the
Hmm.
writing and editing, but I can't overcome the feeling that nobody could do the work as well as I'm doing. Any tips? Do you have to be less of a perfectionist when you outsource?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, generally, no one can do the work as well as you can. Like, it's just something where you have to feel, are they doing good enough? And again, this goes way back to what we were saying right at the beginning, where are you adding value? So if I think I can do Facebook ads better than someone else, but that person still does well and their ads are good and they help to make money, if my time is better spent on something else, then it makes sense to let them do it. Um, Whereas if it's something like appearing on Empire Flippers Live, maybe I need to do that because it's me that is sort of adding the value. And many of my team could come on here as well. But I mean, there are certain things that it just makes sense for you to do, and there are certain things that other people might not be able to do 100% as well as you. But if they're good enough to drive the website forward and to grow your business, then that's the more important
Hmm.
thing.
So you would say you kind of have to be a little bit less of a perfectionist, but as long as the work is getting done and it's still successful, then you would just roll with it.
Yeah, and I'm not really saying you should just kind of accept, you know, just accept poor quality work, or because it's your website, you want it to be the best. It's just that at the end of the day, if your perfectionism is getting in the way of you being able to progress the site, then maybe you have to compromise a
Hmm.
little.
Guys, that's gonna wrap it up for us. Dom, thank you so much. I hope you had a good time being on today.
Yeah, I did, and I enjoyed the questions
Yeah,
as
we'll
well.
have to have you back on here sometime. Now, something that's interesting is next week, EF Live, I'll actually be hosting it in Vietnam. I'll be in Saigon, Vietnam. My flight leaves tomorrow. It's a 26 and a half hour travel day, so it's gonna be awful. In
Wow.
addition to losing 12 hours, so like I'm gonna get there what would be about 8 a.m. for me in Eastern time in the U.S. and it's gonna be like 8 p.m. there. So like I'm losing a lot of time, which it's gonna suck. But being in Vietnam is going to be an awesome experience, and we'll be coming at you still EF Live 10 a.m. Eastern Time Wednesday morning. So you'll still see it, and we'll be in Vietnam. It'll be exciting. So look forward to that, and I'll see you guys next week. Dom, thank you again so much. Guys, if you like the content, subscribe on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and subscribe to our mailing list on Empire Flippers if you want more content like this. Before we go, though, Dom, why don't you give yourself a little bit of a plug? Where can people find you?
Humanproofdesigns.com is probably the most useful place to follow us. We also have a Facebook group, which is Niche Site Entrepreneurs, or Niche, depending where you're from. Yeah, either of those places are a good place to find us.
Awesome. And we'll throw those links in the description for the show. So if you're catching this as a rerun, you'll be able to click on those links and check out Dom and his stuff. Ujwal, thank you, Romain and Ujwal, for the nice show, guys. Thank you, Ujwal. Thank you so much for coming back every single week. Like, man, it means a lot, and we hope that this show provides value to you. We really want to assist in buying, selling, starting, and running your own online businesses. And thank you all so much for being here. And Dom, really appreciate it again. Everyone, have a fantastic day.